Welcome to the AtlantECO podcast, where we talk about the science behind the AtlantECO project, the Atlantic Ocean, and the human adventures experienced along the way. Here, we have conversations with guests from around the world who work together so that we can better understand, manage, and protect the ocean. So let's embark on the journey of AtlantECO and discover the world that lies above and beneath the surface of the beautiful Atlantic Ocean. In our very first episode of the AtlantECO podcast, we're talking to Daniele Iudicone, coordinator of the AtlantECO project. We are setting the scene for all the episodes to come as we talk about the story of the project. AtlantECO is a 5-year-long project with partners from all around the Atlantic, and they're working together to study and better understand the Atlantic Ocean so that we can take better care of it and make sure it remains healthy. So, Daniele, welcome to our very first episode on the podcast.
Hi, it's really great to be here. Thank you for organizing this.
No worries. So, before we dive into the story of AtlantECO, can you maybe tell us more about yourself? What brought you to what you're doing today, and where did your love of marine sciences or marine life start?
Okay, first of all, I'm an Italian physical oceanographer, as for information, and for a long time I've been studying ocean currents and how they mix, how water masses transported by the ocean currents mix. At a certain point, I started studying the impact on the life in the ocean, how life is actually impacted by living in a fluid and not on soil, for instance. And my current question, in a way, is how life evolved in the ocean. So how life can evolve in a fluid that is moving all the time, transporting also the nutrients that are the base of life. And this from the micro scale, the scale of the organisms, to the scale of the planet, actually. So the large currents and the basins. It started strangely because I was studying physics, particle physics. I was very annoyed by the size of these huge experiments like the CERN, where thousands of researchers were working together, but each one had just a tiny bit to care about and of the story. So I saw a fish in my institute about an oceanographic cruise, and I was a very young student. So I went to the cruise, and this changed my life. So I went back, I changed my study plan, and then I focused on oceanography. I later did a PhD on that. And then I moved into a Marine Biological Institute here in Naples. And here I met biology, I met life, and quite late in my life, actually. And it's challenged me about which are the most relevant questions to protect the oceans. What do we have to do? What do we have to study? And indeed, this moved me to have a more multidisciplinary approach in our studies of our question. The other last element of the picture is probably that I married a molecular biologist at a certain point, which contributed to this, let's say, current path.
Excellent. And well, now and for the last 20 months, you've been coordinating the AtlantECO project. So how did it all begin, and what was the context for setting up AtlantECO?
So basically, we have been working together in a small group of mostly biologists called the Tara Ocean. A small group that in the last 10 years, more than 10 years, actually worked together to organize global expeditions. So we have been working together to sample and travel all across the oceans and sample life there, especially the microbiome, that is everything that is almost invisible or almost invisible in the ocean. And this brought us to form a group with many disciplines together, moved us to talk to each other, which required many years actually to find the common lexicon, to find a way to understand each other, and actually even to agree on which were the most important questions and how to phrase those questions on the protection, on the sustainability of the use of the ocean, if you want, as a final goal. And so with this experience in mind, we had the occasion we were invited to participate to a proposal for some European funding. And this motivated us to start thinking, okay, let's see what Europe can offer to us. And actually, the agreement didn't work. So at a certain point, we had only 2 months to decide if we wanted to do something by ourselves, alone, or not. And then with Stéphane Pezon, we decided, let's try. And but there was a problem. The problem was that the challenge of studying the oceans is that many frameworks and theories used to understand these ecosystems are derived from the study of terrestrial ecosystems. So we have fixed soil, climatic conditions are quite regular, etc. So our interest was actually to move toward a new framework, the seascape, where we fully consider the fact that this is a completely different system. So everything is on the move, nutrients appear intermittently, they are transported together with the organisms. And also there are thousands of species which are actually interacting. Why our current theories can explain only the existence of something like 10 species, right? There is this so-called plankton paradox, which is one of the most important open questions in science, in fact. So we have thousands of species living in the ocean as a microscopic species, and our theories predict that we can have 10 or maybe 50 maximum, okay? So this huge conceptual gap needed a new framework. So our idea was to add to this small group of mostly biologists, experts on the movement of the ocean, like on ocean currents, experts on the biogeochemistry of the ocean, experts not only in the sampling of the ocean and for the assessment, but also in the modeling of the ocean. So using computer to simulate the ocean currents and the life in the ocean currents. And finally, to really complete the picture, to try to have an understanding of which are the ecosystem services provided, so the so-called ecosystem services. So the services provided by the ocean ecosystem to humanity. We added some economists that were already studying these kind of issues. And there we go. And that's how we built this team quite quickly in only 2 months. And at the first round, we were not successful, but then at the second, we were very successful, and now here we are.
That's brilliant. So in AtlantECO, there's it's European funded, but we have partners from most of the Atlantic basin. So we have people in Europe, we have people in Brazil, in South America, and then in South Africa, in Africa. So how did all these people come together? How did you build that team with the rest of the core group?
As often in these cases, sometimes where some of them are friends, or the starting the initial contact were people that were already working with us as a Tare Oceans group, and then we asked them to Brazil and South Africa to identify people that could be interested in joining us in this assessment of the health of the Atlantic microbiome and of the microplastics associated. So that's basically so the word spread, and then in that way we're actually able to find to create a very nice group, because it's very complementary in terms of disciplines. Geographically also, for instance, in Brazil, there are many universities from all over the Brazil that are involved, and actually the same happened in Europe.
Brilliant. And of course, well, we want to know more about the project. So for the people that have no idea what AtlantECO is, can you explain what we're doing and also why we're doing all of this?
So as we say, the starting point is that the Atlantic is one ocean, right? So cannot be split into small regions which are not communicating. And also that means that the problems of the Atlantic and related to the ecosystem health, specifically in the context of the climate change and other anthropogenic pressures, has to be this issue has to be that as a general problem, we're putting together a good characterization of the life in the different regions of the ocean, but in the context of the ocean transport and movement. And the same happens for microplastics. So microplastics for us is one of the subjects, one of the pillars of the project. But our interest is more in a way to characterize who is living with the microplastics. So basically, this gives us a sort of a coherent framework, because we are using basically the same tools, which are basically the new tools of the human health that we are transferring to study the ocean health. So basically, genetics and genomics as a baseline. And we are using these same tools that we use now to characterize illness in humans, to analyze, to understand, to describe, assess, and understand who is there and what is doing, basically, either on a small piece of plastic traveling in the middle of the Atlantic or in living in the water as a free living organism. That's somehow the big picture. And in that sense, it's very ambitious and very new as a project. And also the team is very new, so it's not people that were collaborating before in most cases, which poses new challenges, right? So there is really the need to have a permanent dialogue across disciplines. And I have to say the pandemic was a bit of unfortunate, because at the beginning it was very difficult to create these links internally in the project, because you have to meet the people, you have to spend time talking at a coffee break, you have to really exchange. And that said, anyway, we started well. We have already first characterization of the connectivity of the ocean. That is, how do you move from a region to another region in the ocean? In which time, the scale, which pathway do you do, and what kind of environment you experience during the journey. So is the temperature going to change your water mass that is transporting you? Is the salinity, are the nutrients going to change? We have been studying the interactions across the organism, which is another big question. So now, up to now, marine ecology is based on this bottom-up view, that is, we have a few nutrients, and those nutrients regulate the life in the ocean, right? So there is more phosphate than nitrate, then you have kind of response, etc., etc. In fact, recently we are understanding there are so many thousands of different organisms living together, and in fact they interact a lot. So what is regulating life in the ocean is not only the availability of the resources, but is actually what kind of interaction they're going to have. It can be predation, but can be also symbiosis, that is helping each other to exchange substances, etc. This is very challenging. We had some first results really encouraging on this picture, and then all this has to be somehow considered in the context of the climate change, which is dramatically changing the conditions in the oceans, and that's why we did a study on the biogeography of the oceans, using this genomic data. But at the end of, so the second part of the study was actually say, okay, let's take the projections that some scientists are doing about what are going to be the oceans at the end of the century, and then use those to try to guess what is going to be the biogeography of the oceans. Where for biogeography, I intend the provinces of the oceans that are characterized by more or less the same organism, okay, the same kind of life. And this was a very successful study, just published. But then probably the most important goal we reached is organizing the expeditions. That is our aim first aim is to assess, right, the ocean health. And in many regions of the Atlantic, especially in the South Atlantic, no one went there with advanced tools or approach to really understand who is there in the water, what is doing, viruses, bacteria, small algae, small animals. And so we organized a set of sampling exercise, so with the boats, research vessels of different kind. And in particular, we are completing now a very big, ambitious expedition called Mission Microbiomes, which is going all around the South Atlantic and sampling and trying to sample the different environmental conditions, especially close to the coast. So trying to see what is the impact of human activities close to rivers or big cities. and which implied putting together very multidisciplinary approach, very advanced protocols, so collaborating also with the partner from US and other countries, but also to collaborate with the countries we were visiting. So it was a real collaboration. So for instance, in Brazil, we designed together with our Brazilian colleague the scientific questions, the sampling exercise, and they were on board to lead actually the exercise. And now I would say, just to finish this quick overview, the challenge is now, I think, is to create the community, right? So now we have about 40 young people working in the project, in addition to the seniors like us. And this is really amazing. This is really exciting. So, and now we know the challenge is to create this group of people, this list of people, to make them becoming a community, which shares question, but shares also interest and help each other. And this, I think, probably is the most important legacy of the project, I hope.
So beside the science in AtlantECO, there is a lot of activities around research, supporting all these activities and making people aware of all these issues and challenges that we're addressing. So how are we doing that in AtlantECO?
So in AtlantECO, we have other aspects in science, in fact, and one of these is the formation. So we are introducing very innovative protocols and approaches, and which are not very common in marine ecology, and this is especially true for some countries. So what we are doing is having an effort with training schools and other kind of formation to try to disseminate these approaches into institutions that are not normally using them, like, for instance, how to analyze the DNA of the microbiome, how to sample it and analyze and understanding what is the function. This is a big challenge, but we are dealing with it. The other one is to introduce a literacy around the big questions we have, that is to prepare some material that is going to be disseminated, especially targeting secondary schools in different countries from Brazil, South Africa, and Europe. And that requires a lot of work. We are actually in this process, and then we are trying to collect also stakeholders of the project, which means people that can be, or groups or communities that can be interested in knowing more of our results to better understand how they can manage and program their life in a way. This is a big challenge. One comment I want to do is that I want to make here is that there was an important milestone in the project, which was this meeting, fantastic week actually, we had in South Africa recently, where we finally met in person our South African colleagues, and this brought to many discussions on how difficult it is to organize a project which has an impact when we are dealing with so many different social conditions, economic conditions, cultural conditions. So putting together so many countries with so large differences is a really a challenge, more than we thought before. So we are confronted with questions like, what should be the priority of science to address the societal needs? So we should not give for granted that what we see here in Europe as priorities should be the same in South Africa, for instance, or in Brazil. Maybe they have other needs. So the societies are deeply different. Another one is how do we integrate the local knowledge on the oceans, which is there since centuries, which is very complex, rich, with the scientific knowledge, what we are supposedly considering the most important knowledge, and which is brought from Europe directly there. So, and the other challenge, I think, maybe the most important, if we want to have an impact, we have to think about the sustainability of the approaches we are actually trying to disseminate. So sampling, monitoring the ecosystem status, ecosystem health, for instance, as a cost. has a cost which is quite high. So we realize that we're realizing that our protocols are too costly, maybe for a permanent monitoring. So, which means that we have to revise and redesign the sampling procedures. We are realizing that you need infrastructure. So we give for granted that we have a national and European infrastructure to help us, but sometimes these infrastructure are not available there. If you don't have an infrastructure dedicated to supporting the monitoring of ecosystems, it's very difficult to think about a long-term program. And similarly for the formation, it's clearly not enough to do a training school or to go, to have a secondment, because if you want to use a new approach, you have to learn a lot of different discipline, and from, for instance, the taxonomy, the capability to recognize an organism, to the capability to use these bioinformatics or tools, algorithms to understand what is their DNA, to better understand what are they doing in the ocean. This together with the physicists and mathematicians and chemists, etc. So the depth of the knowledge we have to create is significant, and indeed, to really have an impact, we have to redesign what we are trying to do with them in the next year, probably, and also provide suggestions to the European Union, I think, to redesign somehow this kind of collaborations in a way that have higher impact for the future.
Yeah, so really interesting. And it's going to be obviously very difficult to catch all the details of such a big project in a short episode. So we will come back to, in future episodes, we have, an episode focusing on microplastics and the plastosphere. Then we will cover, what is seascape, what is the microbiome, and we will ask those questions about the specific experiments in the sampling expeditions, and then cover, what are ecosystem services. So we will, of course, dive into all these different topics. But that was a great first overview of AtlantECO. Thank you so much for being our first guest and for providing your insight into AtlantECO and where we are today.
Thank you to you. Thank you very much.
We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode and look forward to seeing you next time. You can follow the AtlantECO project on our website on www.atlanteco.eu, and you can also find us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. All the links and information on the project and on today's episode is in the show notes.